What's that generation? Good evening, wherever you happen to be, whether you're listening on the live stream or watching on YouTube or Facebook afterwards. Hello, and I hope you're all well. My name is Damien, the tall, friendly Atheist Dad, from the Tall, Friendly Atheist Dad podcast. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, and many, many more. You can also listen to the podcast at www.tallfriendlyatheistdad.com. You can go to twitter.com/TFADpod, facebook.com/TFADpod, or anchor.fm/TFADad. And welcome to part 4 of reading Sam Harris's Letter to a Christian Nation, a challenge to faith. If you head over to the YouTube channel for the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad podcast, go to youtube.com, search for the Tall Friendly Atheist Dad podcast, or even just Tall Friendly Atheist Dad, and you'll find me. But I have playlists of all the other books I've been live reading, with commentary and rebuttal, and sometimes even agreement, from an intellectual atheist perspective. So yeah, if you're listening on the live stream, feel free to comment. If you want to be part of the discussion, feel free to message me, and I'll happily send you the StreamYard link, and you can be next to me, or figuratively, of course, and yeah, we can have that discussion together. But anyway, let me get set up here. Get my microphone nice and comfy, nice and close, as I so currently on page 25 of the book. Now this is actually a fairly short book, so yeah, we'll breeze through the pages. So yeah, anyway, let me just get this a little bit more comfortable. Let me give my son a quick hug. He has me feeling the best today, so yeah, wish him well. But for Father's Day, he did make me a very nice breakfast in bed, like a very nice breakfast in bed. So I'm really happy for him to, yeah, very thankful he did that. That was nice. So anyway, so we are on page 25. If you do happen to be reading along, otherwise feel free to listen. Feel free to comment, leave a comment in the chat, and yeah, I'll happily respond. So anyway, so with the click of the fingers after 3, so let me just get adjusted level so I can hear myself a little bit more. Yes, that's a little bit better. So with the click of the fingers in 3, 2, 1. One of the most pernicious effects of religion is that it tends to divorce morality from the reality of human and animal suffering. Religion allows people to imagine that their concerns are moral when they are not. That is, when they have nothing to do with suffering or its alleviation. Indeed, religion allows people to imagine that their concerns are moral when they are highly immoral. That is, when pressing these concerns inflicts unnecessary and appalling suffering on innocent human beings. This explains why Christians like yourself expend more moral energy opposing abortion than fighting genocide. It explains why you are more concerned about human embryos than about the life-saving promise of stem cell research. And it explains why you can preach against condom use in sub-Saharan Africa while millions die from AIDS there each year. You believe that your religious concerns about sex, in all their tiresome immensity, have something to do with morality, and yet your efforts to constrain the sexual behaviour of consenting adults, and even to discourage your own sons and daughters from having premarital sex, are almost never geared toward the relief of human suffering. In fact, relieving suffering seems to rank rather low on your list of priorities. Your principal concern appears to be that the creator of the universe will take offense at something people do while naked. This prudery of yours contributes daily to the surplus of human misery. Consider, for instance, the human papillomavirus, HPV. HPV is now the most common sexually transmitted disease in the United States. The virus infects over half the American population and causes nearly 5,000 women to die each year from cervical cancer. The Centers for Disease Control, CDC, estimates that more than 200,000 die worldwide. We now have a vaccine for HPV that appears to be both safe and effective. The vaccine produced 100% immunity in the 6,000 women who received it as part of a clinical trial. And yet, Christian conservatives in our government have resisted a vaccination program on the grounds that HPV is a valuable impediment to premarital sex. These pious men and women want to preserve cervical cancer as an incentive towards abstinence, even if it sacrifices the lives of thousands of women each year. This is something that I have noted within the fundamentalist evangelical Christian community. Now, I'm not saying every one of them is like this, but it just seems to be that the more vocal and the more pugnacious and the more rabid ones, it would seem that they would rather people suffer than for their God to be offended. And in some instances, people's suffering is what pleases God. And this is a theme that I've been discussing yesterday with Maximo when we were reading, I think, through part 8 of Creflo Dollar's Total Life Prosperity, but also a theme that we touched on through the readings of On the Jews and Their Lies by Martin Luther. So yeah, like if you believe that cancer is a good thing, then you don't even deserve a spot at the table when it comes to morality, let alone a voice. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, anyway, 3, 2, 1. There is nothing wrong with encouraging teens to abstain from having sex, but we know beyond any doubt that teaching abstinence alone is not a good way to curb teenage pregnancy or the spread of sexually transmitted disease. In fact, kids who are taught abstinence alone are less likely to use contraceptives when they do have sex, as many of them inevitably will. And give me a sec, just going to pause. One study found that teen virginity pledges postpone intercourse for 18 months on average, while in the meantime, these virgin teens were more likely than their peers to engage in oral and anal sex. American teenagers engage in about as much sex as teenagers in the rest of the developed world, but American girls are 4 to 5 times more likely to become pregnant, to have a baby, or to get an abortion. Young Americans are also far more likely to be infected by HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases. The rate of gonorrhea among American teens is 70 times higher than it is among their peers in the Netherlands and France. The fact that 30% of our sex education programs teach abstinence only at a cost of more than $200 million a year surely has something to do with this. The problem is that Christians like yourself are not principally concerned about teenage pregnancy and the spread of the disease. That is, you are not worried about the suffering caused by sex. You are worried about sex. As if this fact needed further corroboration, Reginald Finger, an evangelical member of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, recently announced that he would consider opposing an HIV vaccine, thereby condemning millions of men and women to die unnecessarily from AIDS each year, because such a vaccine would encourage premarital sex by making it less risky. This is one of the many points on which your religious beliefs become genuinely lethal. Your qualms about embryonic stem cell research are similarly obscene. Here are the facts. Okay, I see there's a couple of comments. I'm just going to quickly jump into the comments. And, hey. Quickly jump to the comments. My old buddy, Woyo Pay 2, says, hello. Hello back. Hope you're doing well. And America technically has the most PRN industry. I'm not going to say it loud because I've got my son next to me. But yes, yeah, that's they do. They are one of the world leaders in that industry, which is just makes it all the more interesting. You know, I'm just going to pause for a second. So give me a sec. Sorry about that. Just had to quickly take care of something. But technically, what does that have to do with anything? Well, if you do, I can say, yeah, because you've come in a little bit late. Basically, this whole section is about conservative evangelical Christians opposing vaccines for various sexually transmitted diseases because the fact that people are having sex outside of religious contexts offends God. So what Sam Harris is trying to say is that these people would rather people die because the activity is risky than do something to eliminate that risk, even though the activity is, the activity in itself is harmless. Or when it comes into consensual and informed relationships. So anyway, I'll get back to the book. 3, 2, 1. Your qualms about embryonic stem cell research are similarly obscene. Here are the facts. Stem cell research is one of the most promising developments in the last century of medicine. It could offer therapeutic breakthroughs for every disease or injury process that human beings suffer, for the simple reason that embryonic stem cells can become any tissue in the human body. This research may also be essential for our understanding of cancer, along with a wide variety of developmental disorders. Given these facts, it is almost impossible to exaggerate the promise of stem cell research. It is true, of course, that research on embryonic stem cells entails the destruction of 3-day-old human embryos. This is a fact that worries you. Let us look at the details. A 3-day-old human embryo is a collection of 150 cells called a blastocyst. There are, for the sake of comparison, more than 100,000 cells in the brain of a fly. The human embryos that are destroyed in stem cell research do not have brains or even neurons. Consequently, there is no reason to believe they can suffer their destruction in any way at all. It is worth remembering, in this context, that when a person's brain has died, we currently deem it acceptable to harvest his organs, provided he has donated them for this purpose, and bury him in the ground. It is acceptable to treat a person whose brain has died as something less than a human being, it should be acceptable to treat a blastocyst as such. If you are concerned about suffering in this universe, killing a fly should present you with greater moral difficulties than killing a human blastocyst. Perhaps you think that the crucial difference between a fly and a human blastocyst is to be found in the latter's potential to become a fully developed human being. But almost every cell in your body is a potential human being, given our recent advances in genetic engineering. Every time you scratch your nose, you have committed a holocaust of potential human beings. This is a fact. The argument from a cell's potential gets you absolutely nowhere. Okay, and yes, this is what this is an argument that I come across from conservative Christians, is that, well, a human is a human at the time of conception because it can potentially become a human. And then I do sometimes come back with this argument that, given the advances in genetic technology, that you could potentially make a human out of your hair or your toenail or something like that, because that does have a copy of your DNA. But I see there's a few comments in the chat, so I'm just going to quickly blast through the comments. And so first comment we've got is opposing vaccines. Don't get me started. I've seen so many anti-vaccinators in my country since it was invented. Here. Yep, correct. This is the thing, and we do have some anti-vaxxers here in Australia as well. Not quite as strong as it is in America, but if you look up a guy called Pete Evans, who is a celebrity chef, the last few years he has kind of, maybe the word has gone off the deep end, but he's become like a soft anti-vaxxer to almost a hard anti-vaxxer COVID conspiracist. And the second comment here, I've watched a video about opposing vaccines in science is Dope's channel, and that neo-Christian anti-vaccines are speaking some BS. Yep, they certainly believe what they want. Archaeologian. Yep. Hey, Mr. Archaeologian. The fly statement is something from what I heard from Jain philosophy. Yeah, that's Sam Harris actually does reference the Jains as a when he discusses Islam, he does have he basically says that fundamentalist religion isn't a problem if the fundamentals of that religion are totally committed to non-violence, and the Jains take commitment to non-violence quite extreme. But yeah, so just on this argument here about the potential for humans, or the argument against abortion because of the potential for humans, then given the fact that up to a third of all pregnancies end in miscarriage, then that would make God the most prolific anti-human of all, if you get what I mean. But anyway, back to the book. But let us assume for the moment that every 3-day-old human embryo has a soul worthy of our moral concern. Embryos at this stage occasionally split, becoming separate people, identical twins. Is this a case of one soul splitting into two? Two embryos sometimes fuse into a single individual called a chimera. You or someone you know may have developed in this way. No doubt theologians are struggling even now to determine what becomes of the extra-human soul in such a case. Isn't it time we admitted that this arithmetic of souls does not make any sense? The naive idea of souls in a petri dish is intellectually defensible. It is also morally indefensible, given that it now stands in the way of some of the most promising research in the history of medicine. Your beliefs about the human soul are, at this very moment, prolonging the scarcely endurable misery of tens of millions of human beings. You believe that life starts at the moment of conception. You believe that there are souls in each of these blastocysts, and that the interests of one soul, the soul of a little girl with burns over 75% of her body, say, cannot trump the interests of another soul, even if that soul happens to live inside a petri dish. Given the accommodation we have made to faith-based irrationality in our public discourse, it is often suggested, even by advocates of stem cell research, that your position on this matter has some degree of moral legitimacy. It does not. Your resistance to embryonic stem cell research is, at best, uninformed. There is, in fact, no moral reason for our federal government's unwillingness to fund this work. We should throw immense resources into stem cell research, and we should do so immediately. Because of what Christians like yourself believe about souls, we are not doing this. In fact, several states have made such work illegal. If one experiments on a blastocyst in South Dakota, for instance, one risks spending years in prison. The moral truth here is obvious. Anyone who feels that the interests of a blastocyst just might supersede the interests of a child with a spinal cord injury has had his moral sense blinded by religious metaphysics. The link between religion and morality, so regularly proclaimed and so seldom demonstrated, is fully belied here, as it is wherever religious dogma supersedes moral reasoning and genuine compassion. And yeah, this is the thing. If we are concerned about reducing human suffering, then how can I say, outdated concepts of when we grant the right to life to cells, does get in the way. And this is the thing, and again, the fact that up to a third of pregnancies don't work out. You kind of have to, does that technically make the mother a killer? Or, so, I know we can imbibe a poetic or a metaphorical sense of humanhood to the organism growing inside, but the things are should we? And I'm not convinced yet that we should. But yeah, I think Sam Harris does make a good point that a 150 cell collection of cells somehow is worth more than the brain of a fly, which has 100,000 cells. But yeah. Anyway, so we'll get on to the next section, which is called Doing Good for God, and we're currently 23 minutes in, so all right, we'll go for a bit longer. In 3, 2, 1. What about all the good things people have done in the name of God? It is undeniable that many people of faith make heroic sacrifices to relieve the suffering of other human beings. But is it necessary to believe anything on insufficient evidence in order to behave this way? If compassion were really dependent upon religious dogmatism, how could we explain the work of secular doctors in the most war-ravaged regions of the developing world? Many doctors are moved simply to alleviate human suffering without any thought of God. While there is no doubt that Christian missionaries are also moved by a desire to alleviate suffering, they come to the task encumbered by a dangerous and divisive mythology. Missionaries in the developing world waste a lot of time and money, not to mention the goodwill of non-Christians, proselytizing to the needy. They spread inaccurate information about contraception and sexually transmitted disease, and they withhold accurate information. While missionaries do many noble things at great risk to themselves, their dogmatism still spreads ignorance and death. By contrast, volunteers for secular organizations, like Doctors Without Borders, do not waste any time telling people about the virgin birth of Jesus. Nor do they tell people in sub-Saharan Africa, where nearly 4 million people die from AIDS every year, that condom use is sinful. Christian missionaries have been known to preach the sinfulness of condom use in villages where no other information about condoms is available. This kind of piety is genocidal. We might also wonder, in passing, which is more moral, helping people purely out of concern for their suffering, or helping them because you think the creator of the universe will reward you for it. And give me a sec to have a quick break. Okay. And there is actually a footnote here in the book. Just after the line, this kind of piety is genocidal. And Sam's got the footnote. If you can believe it, the Vatican is currently opposed to condom use even to prevent the spread of HIV from one married partner to another. The Pope is rumoured to be reconsidering this policy. Cardinal Javier Lozano Barragan, president of the Pontifical Council for Healthcare, announced on Vatican Radio that his office is now conducting a very profound scientific, technical, and moral study of this issue. Needless to say, if church doctrine changes as a result of these pious deliberations, it will be a sign, not that faith is wise, but that one of its dogmas has grown untenable. So, on with the book. Mother Teresa is a perfect example of the way in which a good person, moved to help others, can have her moral intuitions deranged by religious faith. Christopher Hitchens put it with characteristic bluntness. Mother Teresa was not a friend of the poor. She was a friend of poverty. She said that suffering was a gift from God. She spent her life opposing the only known cure for poverty, which is the empowerment of women and the emancipation of them from a livestock version of compulsory reproduction. While I am in substantial agreement with Hitchens on this point, there is no denying that Mother Teresa was a great force for compassion. Clearly, she was moved by the sufferings of her fellow human beings, and she did much to awaken others to the reality of that suffering. The problem, however, was that her compassion was channeled within the rather steep walls of her religious dogmatism. In her Nobel Prize acceptance speech, she said, "The great destroyer of peace is abortion. Many people are very, very concerned with the children in India, with the children in Africa, where quite a number die, maybe of malnutrition, of hunger, and so on. But millions are dying deliberately by the will of the mother. And this is what is the greatest destroyer of peace today. Because if a mother can kill her own child, what is left for me to kill you and you kill me? There is nothing in between." And just on that, if you do happen to find the book, Mother Teresa, The Untold Story by Dr. Arup Chatterjee, he really tears into the Mother Teresa myth. And for me personally, that book is very hard reading because I grew up in the 80s and 90s on the Mother Teresa myth. But this is it's interesting. Religious zealots are more concerned about what technically isn't a life inside a human body than and it's sort of like the way, and particularly with the current laws in Texas, is sort of like the woman becomes a reproductive servant of the state, which I think is a dangerous thing, especially with the bounty hunt, or the tip off line. I think that's that is actually quite dangerous. But no. So Mother Teresa was more of a I don't think she was there to relieve suffering. She was more there to ensure that people stayed in bad shape in order to learn about God, which is incredibly dangerous. And there is also in Dr. Arup Chatterjee's book, he does make mention of people being forced to sign over themselves to receive charity, and it's oh my God, that's a problem. But anyway, back to the book. 3, 2, 1. As a diagnosis of the world's problems, these remarks are astonishingly misguided. As a statement of morality, they are no better. Mother Teresa's compassion was very badly calibrated if the killing of first trimester fetuses disturbed her more than all the other suffering she witnessed on this earth. While abortion is an ugly reality, and we should all hope for breakthroughs in contraception that reduce the need for it, one can reasonably wonder whether most aborted fetuses suffer their destruction on any level. One cannot reasonably wonder this about the millions of men, women, and children who must endure the torments of war, famine, political torture, or mental illness. At this very moment, millions of sentient people are suffering unimaginable physical and mental afflictions in circumstances where the compassion of God is nowhere to be seen, and the compassion of human beings is often hobbled by preposterous ideas about sin and salvation. If you are worried about human suffering, abortion should rank very low on your list of concerns. And this is actually, I'll click the fingers. This is actually something that I kind of suffered firsthand when I was suffering my mental health issues when I was in my fundamentalist charismatic church, because it was all spiritualized. I didn't get the help I needed, and that in itself should be worrying. And like the two pastors of the churches that I was in this particular movement, they both had PhDs from respectable universities in scientific fields, and they still believe that mental illness was caused by the spiritual forces, which is back to the book. While abortion remains a ludicrously divisive issue in the United States, the moral position of the church on this matter is now fully and horribly incarnated in the country of El Salvador. In El Salvador, abortion is now illegal under all circumstances. There are no exceptions for rape or incest. The moment a woman shows up at a hospital with a perforated uterus, indicating that she has had a back alley abortion, she is shackled to a hospital bed and her body is treated as a crime scene. Forensic doctors soon arrive to examine her womb and cervix. There are women now serving prison sentences 30 years long for terminating their pregnancies. Imagine this, in a country that also stigmatizes the use of contraception as a sin against God. And yet this is precisely the sort of policy one would adopt if one agreed with Mother Teresa's assessment of world suffering. Indeed, the Archbishop of San Salvador actively campaigned for it. His efforts were assisted by Pope John Paul II, who declared on a visit to Mexico City in 1999 that the Church must proclaim the gospel of life and speak out with prophetic force against the culture of death. May the continent of hope also be the continent of life. And just on that, my best friend, Maxi, he is from El Salvador, and he could tell you stories about all the corruption and the drug violence that happens there. And so I just find it interesting that, the religious figures are more concerned with what happens inside a woman's body than they are with, the quality of life, the violence, the corruption, and all that other stuff. I just find it, interesting that religion seems to misplace people's priorities. But anyway, back to the book. Of course, the Church's position on abortion takes no more notice of the details of biology than it does of the reality of human suffering. It has been estimated that 50% of all human conceptions end in spontaneous abortion, usually without a woman even realizing that she was pregnant. In fact, 20% of all recognized pregnancies end in miscarriage. There is an obvious truth here that cries out for acknowledgement. If God exists, he is the most prolific abortionist of all. And, yeah, that's a very strong point. I can give my son a quick hug. Okay. Yeah. How about you close your eyes and relax? Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately my son's feeling the lockdown strain. Yeah, it's... So you just gotta wish him well and give him lots of hugs and let him know that his dad's there for him, and we will get through this. It's a day by day, step by step. You remember the story about the tortoise and the hare? Yeah. How does a tortoise win the race? One step at a time. And we'll get there. We'll get there. Anyway, I won't go for too much longer. This is for about 36 minutes. And the number of viewers I've had seems to have dropped off anyway. But yeah, let me go to the next section called Are Atheists Evil? And this is on page 38, if you're reading along. Are atheists evil? If you are right to believe that religious faith offers the only real basis for morality, then atheists should be less moral than believers. In fact, they should be utterly immoral. Are they? Do members of atheist organizations in the United States commit more than their fair share of violent crimes? Do the members of the National Academy of Sciences, 93% of whom do not accept the idea of God, lie, cheat, and steal with abandon? We can be reasonably confident that these groups are at least as well behaved as the general population. And yet, atheists are the most reviled minority in the United States. Polls indicate that being an atheist is a perfect impediment to running for high office in our country, while being black, Muslim, or homosexual is not. Recently, crowds of thousands gathered throughout the Muslim world, burning European embassies, issuing threats, taking hostages, and even killing people, in protest over 12 cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad that were first published in a Danish newspaper. When was the last atheist riot? Is there a newspaper anywhere on this earth that would hesitate to print cartoons about atheism for fear that its editors would be kidnapped or killed in reprisal? Christians like yourself invariably declare... So you just got to do this with one hand. That monsters like Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, and Kim Il-sung sprung from the womb of atheism. While it is true that such men are sometimes enemies of organized religion, they are never especially rational. In fact, their public pronouncements are often delusional. On subjects as diverse as race, economics, national identity, the march of history, and the moral dangers of intellectualism. Now, there is a footnote here for the line, while it is true that such men are sometimes enemies of organized religion, they are never especially rational. And the footnote reads, and Hitler's atheism seems to have been seriously exaggerated. My feelings as a Christian points me to my Lord and Saviour as a fighter. It points me to the man who once in loneliness, surrounded by a few followers, recognized these Jews for what they were and summoned men to fight against them, and who, God's truth, was greatest not as a sufferer but as a fighter. In boundless love as a Christian and as a man, I read through the passage which tells us how the Lord at last rose in his might and seized the scourge to drive out of the temple the brood of vipers and adders. How terrific was his fight for the world against the Jewish poison. As a Christian, I have also a duty to my own people. Hitler said this in a speech on April 12th, 1922. Okay, so back to the book. The problem with such tyrants is not that they reject the dogma of religion, but that they embrace other life-destroying myths. Most become the centre of quasi-religious personality cult, requiring the continual use of propaganda for its maintenance. There is a difference between propaganda and the honest dissemination of information that we, generally, expect from a liberal democracy. Tyrants who orchestrate genocides, or who happily preside over the starvation of their own people, also tend to be profoundly idiosyncratic men, not champions of reason. Kim Il-sung, for instance, demanded that his beds at his various dwellings be situated precisely 500 metres above sea level. His duvets had to be filled with the softest down imaginable. What is the softest down imaginable? It apparently comes from the chin of a sparrow. 700,000 sparrows were required to fill a single duvet. Given the profundity of his esoteric concerns, we might wonder how reasonable a man like Kim Il-sung was. Consider the Holocaust. The anti-Semitism that built the Nazi death camps was a direct inheritance from medieval Christianity. Sorry, just trying to do this with one hand. I've got my other hand around my son. For centuries, Christian Europeans had viewed the Jews as the worst species of heretics and attributed every societal ill to their continued presence among the faithful. While the hatred of Jews in Germany expressed itself in a predominantly secular way, its roots were religious, and the explicitly religious demonization of the Jews of Europe continued throughout the period. The Vatican itself perpetuated the blood libel in its newspapers as late as 1914, and both Catholic and Protestant churches have a shameful record of complicity with the Nazi genocide. Auschwitz, the Soviet gulags, and the killing fields of Cambodia are not examples of what happens to people when they become too reasonable. To the contrary, these horrors testify to the dangers of political and racial dogmatism. It is time that Christians like yourself stop pretending that a rational rejection of your faith entails the blind embrace of atheism as a dogma. One need not accept anything on insufficient evidence to find the virgin birth of Jesus to be a preposterous idea. The problem with religion, as with Nazism, Stalinism, or any other totalitarian mythology, is the problem of dogma itself. I know of no society in human history that ever suffered because its people became too desirous of evidence in support of their core beliefs. Now, I will pause the reading there, because I do want to, get going. Make sure my son has a good night's sleep. But yeah, just on the point of medieval persecution of Jews, one of the other playlists that I have on my YouTube channel is reading of the book On the Jews and Their Lies by Martin Luther. And yeah, Martin Luther has a way with words. He really gets stuck into into the Jews. You know, he calls them all sorts of wondrous names and all that. But the thing we also have to realize is that Hitler, basically praised Luther, and I think his government actually called Luther the first German spiritual Führer. And it's just interesting that but anyway, if you go to that playlist, you'll see exactly what I mean. But yeah, anyway, I'm going to call it a night. Got things to attend to, but yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this reading, and I'll say goodbye. My name is Damien, the tall, friendly atheist dad. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Wherever you are, stay safe. Goodbye.